Great, thanks, Dan. Anyone has any questions, you can line up here. We're going to have to go a little quick because we're running a little behind, so probably only about 4 or 5 questions.
Hello there. I'm Anthony Mackey from Minneapolis in the United States. First, I would suggest that perhaps the Obama administration will try to defeat your National Day of Prayer lawsuit by saying anything related to it is a state secret, which the presidential administrations are quite a fan of, more and more. I was wondering what your organization is doing with the, well, more in detail, what they are doing with the Office of Faith-Based Initiatives in the presidential administration. And Obama, when he took office, expanded it, and even went as far as including some secularists and other secular charity organizations, but still having the religious people there as well.
Yeah, I don't know if he can claim it's a state secret because we're not suing him, we're suing Congress. And we're suing him for executing an act of Congress, basically. When you take a lawsuit, you have to sue the actors, but this is a congressional act that was passed, and it's all out in the open. The facts are already on record. There was already a case, so I don't know how he could duck away from that, but that's a good joke. We have basically taken the lead in the United States on challenging the faith-based initiative. As soon as George Bush came out with it back in 2000 when he was campaigning, he came to Wisconsin. And he said, he stood out in front of this group called Faith Works, and he said, if I'm elected president, this is what I want to fund. Well, he was elected, and he did fund that group. We sued, and we won, and that group has since shut down. So, and then we did one in Phoenix, we did one in your state, we did one in Minneapolis, the parish nursing thing, if you remember that. One in Alaska, around the country, we were wondering, why do we have to keep putting out these fires everywhere? Why don't we go to the beast itself? So we tried to sue George Bush for taking our tax dollars and using it to set up these offices of faith-based initiative. And that resulted in a long story, which was the Hine versus Freedom from Religion Foundation lawsuit and decision in 2007 from the Supreme Court, in which the merits of the case were not decided, but we were denied on standing. They kicked us out on standing, that we didn't have the right to even take the lawsuit. In fact, some of the Supreme Court justices said what Bush was doing might in fact have been unconstitutional, but we just couldn't get at it that way. And that was a real shocker. The ACLU, the Americans United, all the major newspapers were on our side. A lot of groups filed front of the court briefs and that. And yet the 5 of the justices found a way to keep us out of court basically on standing to sue, and which has effectively raised the bar to getting into court. We have to be, it's a little tougher to actually get into court now than it was before when you challenge the executive branch on Establishment Clause violations. So we're continuing, at least at the local level, with faith-based complaints, and also just at the educational level, trying to influence the president to honor state-church separation.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Christer Sturmark, chairman of the Swedish Humanist Association. A quick question. Is it correct, as I have understood it, that there are some states that still prohibits non-believers from taking on certain governmental administrational jobs? And if that is correct, how can that be compatible with the Constitution?
Well, yes and no. It is correct that some states still have statutes on them that are unconstitutional based on the Supreme Court decisions, but that have not actually been overturned yet by the state. So there are some anachronistic statutes here and there. The big one was the 1961 Torcaso versus Watkins, Roy Torcaso, who was a member of our group, by the way. He wanted to become a notary public, which is a low-level kind of thing, but he had to swear that he believed in God to become a notary public. He took that case and is now in the textbooks, Torcaso versus Watkins, and that was in the state of Maryland, and that Maryland law was overturned, which means that according to the U.S. Supreme Court, any other states that have some of those old-fashioned laws are violating the Constitution if they act on them. So, but somebody's going to have to propose it in the legislature to say, let's overturn this statute, right? And who's going to want to do that, right? So.
Thanks. I think these court cases are very important. There's in Europe, where each country has its own constitution, and some of them are more restrictive than the American Constitution. There's a tendency now to take cases once all of the national avenues have been exhausted to international human rights law. And there have been, like, for example, the gay rights issue in Ireland wasn't resolved domestically, it was resolved by a court case at European level. Similarly, at the moment, there's organisations in Ireland challenging for the right to secular education under international human rights law. And I was wondering, in America, I know your constitution is more liberal generally than some of the European ones in these aspects. But if you were to lose those cases that you're talking about, have you considered taking them further under American obligations under international human rights laws?
That's a possibility, although we like scrapping it out where we are. You know, we have what we think is a very strong First Amendment. That establishment clause, those first few words are very powerful. But yes, that would be a possibility. Maybe you can, you're from Ireland? Yeah. Maybe you can help us out. By the way, your country is improving. I was just there a couple of years ago, and the young people there say, we are not like our parents. They're embarrassed that Ireland, like the United States, is an outlier on a lot of these things, and they want to catch up with the rest of Europe. So I think that's refreshing to see what's happening. And they also went out of their way to tell me that the scandals in the Catholic Church are really hurting the credibility of religion in your country. So that's kind of a sad way to have it happen, but it's good to see that there's some change being made. Yeah.
Hi, Dan. I'm Jeff Olson from Canada. I'm
Hi.
president of the Humanist Association of Manitoba. Just like I said to Mr. Brown earlier today, one of the tasks I was sent here to Denmark with was to gather information so that we can write a position paper for our organization on our opinion about separation of church and state. The problem is this: Canada is a parliamentary democracy, unlike the US, and we're tied to a monarchy. We have a state church, which of course is the Anglican Church of Canada. And so for us, it's not just as simple as defending our constitution and suing people. What we're looking for is a strategy, and this question goes to you and anybody else who can answer that can talk to me after. I'm looking for resources, and hopefully you will be one of them, or at least your organization will be to us, in the writing of those documents. And I heard earlier that Mr. Brown, somebody else had also mentioned that we need a Copenhagen Accord. I would love that, because it's going to lay out a lot of the information and ideas that I'm hearing here that would help us as atheists worldwide to get organized and to start to do the things that we can do in moving our politicians towards true secular government. And then the question then, after all of that, is this: what does a truly secular government in a country like Canada, which is a parliamentary democracy, look like?
And you know a lot about the Anglican Church, don't you? He used to be a priest in the church, so someday we should hear your story up here. It's a great story. Well, in a truly secular country, people should be free to be religious, obviously. We atheists are not barging into churches. We're not going into synagogues and dragging people out of the pews saying, how can you be so stupid? We want religious freedom, right? We want, when was the last time an atheist knocked on your front door? I mean, we're not like, you know, but any secular country that's going to have an effective democracy has to have some safeguards. In our country, it's the Constitution. A constitutional democracy means there are some freedoms and rights that you can't put to a local vote. You can't vote away freedom of the press. You can't have, there are states in the South who would want to vote to segregate their schools again. They have a long, proud tradition of that practice, and they resented the federal government coming in with something called the Constitution, you know, to tell them. But there are some things in a functioning humanistic secular democracy that should be hardwired into the governing document. Should be a constitutional protections and freedoms. That's what we call our Bill of Rights. So whatever country you're in, something like that, a charter of rights or something that we can refer to say, hey, this is off the table. You can't kick the newspaper out of your city. We have freedom of press here. These are things that are not up for grabs anymore. And in that case, then democracy has its limitations. Because what if the majority of the people are theocrats? They could use democracy to destroy democracy. They could do that, but in a constitutional democracy, we can hard code some of these things in that protect all of us. Are we out of time, David, or should we?
Yeah, we have time for one more.
Okay.
Regarding the ability of the clergy to refuse to report their lodgings as tax deductible, on the internet, there's this guy on YouTube who purports to be an internet pastor, and he reports the donations he receives under, I think, the name Venofang X Ministries. Could he technically refuse to pay taxes for his lodgings?
Technically, but I don't think he would get away with it. The Internal Revenue Service, who collects taxes in our country, knows that the statute says that this person has to be performing official sacerdotal functions. And that's, by the way, one of the issues in our lawsuit. How do they determine what is an official church or not? So, and that usually boils down to having regular meetings, local regular meetings, doing actual functions before an actual congregation of some sort, performing weddings or masses or whatever you do. And if that person is not doing any of these actual street level functions, then the Internal Revenue Service would probably deny that exclusion. It's not a tax exemption, it's a tax exclusion. They don't even have to report that rent or house payment. By the way, it's worse than that. We're out of time, but let me just say that if a minister of the gospel is also making a house payment with these tax excluded monies, they can also deduct the interest on the loan, on the mortgage. They're double dipping, most of them are. So we're trying to challenge that as well. But thank you. I think we're out of time, right? Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Dan.
Very good.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back here at 10 past the hour with